Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We are so glad that you've decided to join us, whether it's your morning, your afternoon, your evening. We're very grateful that you are here. My name is Audrey Morris, and I will be the host for today's session, which is all about designing learning content with a customer-first mindset. So I'm excited to introduce you all to Kristen Buck, who's the lead instructional designer over at Mindbody. But before we get into the presentation, I want to cover a few housekeeping items. So, first and foremost, this session is being recorded. If you have to jump off early, no worries. The link to the recording will be sent to your inbox following the end of the session. If you want to pass this along to a colleague or a friend, you'll have that link in your inbox ready to go. Okay, we will be engaged. This is an engaged conversation. We will be engaged in a back and forth dialogue, Kristen and I, and we want to invite you into that. So throughout the session, if you'd like to drop questions or reactions into the chat, please feel free to do so. I'll be monitoring that as we go along. If you have specific questions, I ask that you please drop those in the Q&A box. I don't want your questions to get lost in the chat. So excitement, reactions, chat, questions, Q&A box, and we'll make sure to cover all of those things. All right, if you are in need of closed captions I almost said this evening, it's the morning for me, but if it's your evening, you will find that icon at the bottom of your screen. So look for the CC icon and that will turn on the closed captions for you. And lastly, at the end of this session, you will receive an opportunity to engage in our survey. The survey is just a few questions. It's an opportunity for us to understand whether or not the content that we're delivering to you is meaningful, purposeful, and you're able to do something with it. So we want to make sure that is the case. So we'd love to hear feedback from you all. Okay, with that, I'm going to introduce you all to Kristen Buck, and I'll let Kristen take it away.
Thanks so much, Audrey. I'm Kristen Buck. I'm really excited to be here today. I'm looking forward to this conversation. And again, welcome any questions or chat, comments. That way, it can be more than just learning from my experience, but also learning from each other. I'm a lead instructional designer here at Playlist. Playlist is the parent company of Mindbody. Our learning center primarily supports our Mindbody and Booker customers, which includes businesses like gyms, salons, spas, and integrative health facilities, to name several. I also work part-time as a Pilates instructor, and I've done that for about 13 years. This puts me in a unique position where I'm at Mindbody and Playlist. I'm designing for customers like Pilates instructors. And then when I'm working as a Pilates instructor, I am the customer. So I get to really focus on usability and real world application from various directions. On a personal level, I live near Denver, Colorado with my husband, three kids, and two cats. So it feels like a constant adventure. Yesterday, in fact, we actually had a snow day, a little wild here for Colorado, but not unexpected. So really enjoyed. I just love living here in Colorado. It's beautiful. And then in addition to that, I like to go outside. My kids are all very involved in youth sports. If you're in that world, you know what that's like. And I love to travel, especially when it's not for youth sports. So that's a little bit about me, and then I will pass back to Audrey.
Amazing. Thanks, Kristen. I love that your world is so integrated in the fitness health realm, both at work and at home. That's awesome. Okay, so folks, today we are going to be engaged, like I said, in a back and forth dialogue. So Kristen and I are going to be, I'm going to be asking a lot of questions. Again, we invite you, if you've just joined us, to ask questions as well. So please submit those to the Q&A box. But to kick things off, Kristen, I'm going to ask our first question, which is, when your team first started building this learning experience, which I'll let you kind of explain and provide context for, what challenge or opportunity were you trying to solve for your customers? Like what brought about the need for Evolve and the need to build a new learning experience?
Well, first, let me just start with I think, and I'll get into what this learning experience looks like for us, but our primary challenge was really adapting our content in a way that made it easier to manage and maintain over time. We needed a sustainable solution. And so that was critical not just for our internal efficiency, but also to help build customer trust. I'm sure you can all relate that you want your learners, users, customers to have accurate and up-to-date information. It also supports our team's broader objectives, which is aligning with providing self-serving resources for customers so that they don't have to reach out to our support teams unless it's needed. And again, let me pause here and talk a little bit about this learning experience or journey for our team. It's been several years, and the initial problem was that a lot of our content was becoming very out of date. And we started by reshaping our learning center and rebuilding over 170 lessons, transitioning from these long form videos, some of them being up to like 30 minutes long, to the modular evolve format. And the intent of this was really just to help. It allowed us the opportunity to be able to maintain and manage our content, but also for users to be able to easily digest content where they could go in a lesson and easily find exactly what they needed rather than having it buried in a 30-minute video. While we still find videos important, we try to find a good blend. And so that gives you just a little bit of a background into what we did initially, in addition to overhauling all of our outdated and old content into Evolve lessons. We also, over time, have rebuilt our learning center, which includes changing the structure, the navigation, even our learning paths, and then also updating our certifications. So, like I said, it's been several years. It's been a lot of work that has gone into rebuilding our learning center to what we call Learning Center 2.0.
Amazing. And Kristen, I'm going to throw a follow-up question at you. Can you describe what the process was of defining all of the new elements of your learning center? So as you looked at changing navigation and things like that, were you already at that point engaging customer feedback to understand what would make for a more seamless experience, or what was that process for your team?
It's been experimental, to say the least. So I think, and this is being very real with how this went about for our team. I think moving forward, we've been very informed and we would probably go about this in a different way. As far as when we moved over to Evolve, we didn't have a lot of customer feedback. Just we hadn't been receiving very much feedback within Intellum and our lessons. And so a lot of our experience and that feedback came from internal resources, any data that we could capture internally, taking note of when customers would reach out. So that was a lot of, and working with stakeholders, internal stakeholders and SMEs, that's what informed those initial changes. We, at that time, I think we just had gained access to Evolve. And so it just presented us this opportunity to use this course authoring tool in order to build out these lessons. It wasn't until later, actually, I think I don't know if it was, we had already completed overhauling lessons, or it may have been during that process that we implemented a survey to capture customer feedback. And I'll get into that and talk a little bit more about that today as well.
Amazing. Thanks so much. Okay, we're going to move on to the next question, which is, a lot of us talk a lot about being customer first. It's kind of a catchphrase, right? But what does it actually look like when you're designing or curating learning experiences for your customers? Like, how do you bring that value forward in what you're building?
I think this can look different per company, but I do think there are some grounding principles. And so I just want to focus on a couple of key points here. And first is to know your customers. And I think, I'll use customer, learner, and user interchangeably throughout today. But having a customer first approach, I think starts with seeking to understand who you're designing for, which looks, maybe it's asking these questions of who are your users? What are they trying to accomplish? What do they value? Where do they struggle? And then not only just doing that one time, but then coming back and revisiting it. So as your service, your materials, product, as all of that starts to change, your consumers might even change, or your learners, it's important to go back and revisit this concept of really knowing your customer, your learner, because then you can understand if you're actually targeting their needs. Now, for us, in this image here, showing how we've tailored our content into role-based collections. And part of that was because we already had internal data and understanding of the types of users and customers that, our product serves. But we wanted to make sure that we weren't just making assumptions. And so, for us to better understand our customers, we've looked at existing internal data, usage insights. We analyze our certification and learning path engagement. And then a little change that we made to our registration flow was adding a required option asking new users to select their role within the company. Because for Mindbody and our learning center, we know that our learners are tied to businesses. So we wanted to understand of our learners and our active users, what percentage are managers or front desk staff. And so that was a little way to help us get some data into just creating buckets for our users. And then once we had better understood our users here, it just confirmed what we had already known. And so carrying on to the second point here, which is listening to your customers and acting on that feedback. So, for example, when we reshaped our certification program, it was mostly driven from our customer and stakeholder feedback. And users, we were finding we had one large exam here, and users were frustrated because they were being assessed on content not related to their role. And at that time, for example, you'd have a front desk staff member taking a very long exam and needing to understand what a manager needs to understand. And granted, they were frustrated. It was taking time from their day and it wasn't related to what they needed to know. So that helped us identify where this misalignment was happening, which led us to make decisions on reshaping our certification, where now we have it role-based. And now on this image here, it says share your feedback. This is just a lightweight feedback loop that we've incorporated into all of our lessons. So I know survey fatigue is very real, but something that we love and we've seen significant impact from is having a very short survey within all of our evolved lessons. It's visible and it's at the very end. It's also optional, so it's not required for users to, say, complete a lesson. And one thing that changed, just that one little thing of adding this survey here at the bottom, we noticed a significant increase in feedback where we were receiving maybe a handful of responses or feedback via Intellum initially. Once we incorporated this, we were getting hundreds of responses every month, which gave us a much stronger signal into our customer satisfaction and the content quality and even accuracy because we were receiving some qualitative feedback as well. Now, before you run to that next question, just really quick, to be fully transparent, most of the responses that we receive are only ratings. So the ratings are incredibly beneficial though, because they help us establish benchmarks for that customer satisfaction. Of all of the responses that we receive from this survey, probably 5 to 7% is qualitative feedback. And that's something that we continually review and implement on a monthly process for our team.
Amazing. And on that last point, Kristen, are you then does that allow your team to do individualized follow-up with the folks who are sharing the qualitative feedback so it really does solidify the one-to-one communication with your customer?
Yes, and I wouldn't say all the time, because as you're receiving feedback, you may receive feedback that is asking, for instance, for videos and wants more they want more videos. In that case, that's something that we're watching for trends over time. But there's been instances where someone may think that this survey is to reach out to our customer support team. And so it is very beneficial to go back to that report, find that learner, that user, or customer, and then reach out to them and say, hey, we noticed you were trying to reach out to support, provide them the right resource and direction rather than just leaving them hanging to figure it out. So it is coming back, it's improving that customer experience and their trust in Mindbody and our learning center.
That's amazing. Thank you. Okay, yeah, let's get into that next question, which is about the learner journey. So, how did you think about the learner journey for your program, and how did you use Evolve to bring that journey to life?
I think, well, we approached it from really trying to think about how customers actually use our product, which again goes back to Mindbody and Booker. Because our learning center includes a large volume of content, not everything fits neatly into just our role-based collections, and it isn't intended to. But where possible, we design our content to follow a logical progression. So, for example, many of our learning paths align with onboarding flows, starting with foundational concepts and then build towards more advanced workflows as they become relevant and important to that part of the journey. Now, a key part of shaping, I think, the learner journey is cross-functional collaboration. So we're working closely with our internal stakeholders and SMEs who have direct insight into our customer behavior, whether that's our onboarding team, support product, sometimes it's all of these teams, because their input really helps ensure that our learning paths are reflecting the real customer needs and not just our assumptions. Now, going into the second part of that question, from an execution standpoint, Evolve has made it much easier to bring consistency to our learner journey or our learner experience. And some ways that we've done that is by creating a branded theme in the Learning Center, and this theme aligns with our mind body branding. We have standardized lesson structures and templates that we use, which helps us speed up our production when we're creating lessons and content. And then we really love the tagging system in Evolve, which helps us maintain consistency across our content. And I love the tagging. And a use case of how we interact with tagging would be we don't include, we use a variety of components. And so in our template, we don't have all of those components. Rather than we have like the base structure. And then as you're building out your lesson, let's say you want to include a narrative component. We can paste it in. We've got it pasted with the formatting all ready to go, the interaction label, prompts to add, alt text, or maybe it's used a certain structure, and it just makes it so much easier to quickly build our content. So we love the tagging system. We use it all the time. And then one last thing I don't have mentioned here, but we also like Evolve's folder system. As someone who just loves to see everything organized and color coded, it's helpful to have, we have so much content and having within Evolve, being able to quickly jump into learning paths by folder and take a look at all of our lessons associated within Evolve is just really quick and easy and something that we find helpful.
I'm a sucker for color coding and tagging as well.
Always.
I understand. Now, when you're building an Evolve and you have, a lot of content you can include, what process does your team go through to decide what's truly essential for you to provide to your customers? What is it that is like your gold standard for saying, yes, our customers need to know this. No, they don't need to know that.
That's a really good question because I think as an instructional designer, it's a challenge. Everything can seem important, and really understanding what's essential is difficult. I know from personal experience, there's times where I look at the analytics and I see this 8-minute lesson is getting 2.5 minutes on average of view, and trying to understand why is that happening? What are customers finding important? And so to help answer that, I think what we really try to rely on would be subject matter experts or SMEs, and because they can help us validate accuracy and relevancy within our content, as well as we look at support data to identify customer questions that they're having and pain points, as well as we lean on that customer feedback. So that's going back to that survey. And that's something that we consistently are looking at. I want to take a second and talk a little bit about collaborating with SMEs because I really think this is so important into finding the right content, the right and tailored content for your needs. And so working with SMEs, a feature that we've used within Evolve that's showing here is the review functionality. So adding those comments directly in Evolve is incredibly beneficial for us. And some ways that we've found success in working with our SMEs and using this tool is by offering clear guidance. So we have, a message script that we can send SMEs, like new SMEs, who haven't used Evolve before, helping them quickly kind of get onboarded to using this tool, creating their account, and then adding those comments. At times, there obviously are individuals that may not want to interact within the Evolve lesson. And so, something that I've also found very beneficial is to offer live review sessions. Right now, working to add several new lessons. It's a new section to an existing learning path. And I'm working with several SMEs to help build out these lessons. And so I have weekly sessions where we're coming together, talking live. They can show me demonstrations, and I can use my tools like recording and AI to help. But I'm also going in and I'm adding comments within Evolve as we have these review sessions. And it just makes it so easy. I know exactly where that comment is linking to. I don't have to review a block of feedback and try to figure it out myself. And so, pausing, or I guess stepping away from talking about SMEs, let's talk a little bit about interaction within lessons because I think it's important. Evolve has so many interactive elements, and as a designer, sometimes you just want to use it all, but we've learned that balance is key. So, customers, at least our customers, have consistently expressed they do enjoy having those interactive elements and they enjoy having videos. They don't like having too much text. And so it's a challenge, I think, but you have to work to blend these formats thoughtfully rather than maybe over-indexing on one format. So a way that we do that is we regularly revisit our content by proactively auditing our lessons, looking at user feedback, and then checking to see, do we need to simplify this lesson? Is it making sense? Is there important information that's hidden? And that's part of how we determined not just what the content needs to be in the lesson, but how it shows up in the lesson and what does the user experience look like for these customers.
And Kristen, what's the cadence at which you're doing that review process? I know when you were talking about
Mhm.
your feedback survey, you review that on a monthly cadence. What is the process for you all when you're looking at, does this particular does this particular element need to change, or do we need to restructure this particular piece of content into a shorter video or long form text, or yeah, what does that process look like?
It it depends on how much content, and honestly, part of it's our workload. So we call it proactive auditing. And right now, I'd say we're doing about 20-ish lessons a month, which is divided amongst all of our team. And our goal really is not to have this be a heavy investment of time. In fact, we have a custom AI agent that's assisting us to check for content accuracy against our support articles, but really just to help us have an eye on the lesson and looking at it rather than waiting for a product to reach out and say, hey, this is out of date. So our goal is within a year to have all of our lessons looked at and reviewed. There are cases where if a lesson requires um, significant updates or what we would call an overhaul, then we push it to a backlog that will be intended for sprints. So we have these processes in place to help our team stay moving forward while still balancing our current workload because we still have incoming requests, we still have projects and work that needs to be done. And as of right now, it seems to be a good balance for our team. Maybe at some other point we can increase our efficiency, or maybe we'll have to tailor it back. But it's something that we will conduct retrospectives for on a monthly basis and then quarterly basis as we keep rolling this out.
Very cool. Yeah, it's always a tricky balance of the new versus old and the updates that have to go alongside all of them. Okay, next question for you. Can you share an example from your program where you used Evolve to create a particularly engaging moment or experience for your learners? And if you can, even go to the extent of sharing, like, what was the reaction that learners gave you?
Yes, I threw something in the chat because initially we were hoping to have a GIF here that kind of scrolled through the lesson. So you're welcome if you want to dive in and take a look at it yourself. It's there in the chat. If you have any issues, please reach out and let me know if that link's not working for you. There is this lesson. There are various parts in our learning center where we have interactive elements that have been a success for our customers. Maybe it's an infographic or matching answers to questions. But I want to focus on this lesson here. So after our first overhaul, where we changed all those video lessons and went into Evolve, um, it took some time and we started collecting feedback. And it was later on that we realized our learners and users weren't always familiar with how to interact with components, even though we had interaction labels on everything. And so that was kind of an eye-opening experience and concerning because it meant that our customers were potentially missing out on important information because they didn't know how to navigate a slider or they didn't realize a flow chart you had to click on a button. And so to support that, we created this lesson here. And this lesson was more than just about interacting with the components. This was tailored with, at that time, we'd done everything. We were ready to launch our Learning Center 2.0, made significant changes. So there was a lot of changes happening for our customers. And as to help set them up for success, that was part of this lesson here. So this lesson is how to navigate our Learning Center. It teaches how to interact with different lesson components, and it uses that a video to help educate that experience. And then also talks about how it has an example of how to provide feedback. Now, at this point, so looking back, we've had this lesson launched for maybe a year and a half now. Um, it's very visible to our customers, and so I think that's part of it is we've made this successful because we have it linked from our homepage. In addition, all of our role-based collections, which are required for certification, this is the very first lesson that users will interact with. And so because of that, looking at the data, this is one of our highest viewed lessons, which makes sense because we've made it very visible. But it is also it has a very high customer satisfaction rating. It's one of our lessons we receive some of the most feedback on, including that written or qualitative feedback. From a lot of feedback, this is one of those lessons where there's been times where we've simplified it because we had a little bit too many options for our learners. And so we've kind of tailored it back to strip it down to what it really needs here. But we've received a lot of positive feedback on just helping learners understand what they need to do. Um, and as a result, we've also seen so many people interact with that survey, which was right there at the very end. I love that this lesson not only teaches how to use and interact with our Evolve format, but it gives people the opportunity to actually click into an accordion, play that video, submit that survey. So it's giving application, sorry, real application rather than just this passive learning experience.
Amazing. And Kristen, a quick question from the chat here. Can you talk a bit more about how you created a library of components?
Mm. Yeah, so library of components is that's referring kind of back to how we use our tagging system. This probably is a workaround, and Audrey, maybe like cover your ears or something. I don't know. But we have a lesson an activity or a lesson in the in Evolve that has every single type of component that we use. And it is formatted exactly how we want it to be formatted. For example, in our narratives, we we have our formatting for how we want to list instructions, which isn't using our usual numbering system. We like to have a certain font size. We're bolding the number, but not the text after that. And so basically, it's a compository of all of the components that we use, and not just components, but it includes pages and blocks. Everything that's been tagged originates here in that lesson. And so that when we're pasting, it's really easy to paste directly from that lesson into everything that we're doing. And everything is tagged and as best practice. So when you're in Evolve, after you've pasted a block, component, page, whatever it is. We also try to remove that tag just to keep things clean. So as you're pasting, you know, okay, if it's the library of tags here, I know I'm pasting the original component and I can edit it from that point. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what we're using that for. It's really to help give us just that foundation, that base to keep all of our tagged components and blocks and pages.
Okay, I'm removing my earmuffs. How do you use Evolve to support customers beyond a single course? In other words, how are you helping your customers stay engaged and continue learning over time? So you spoke a little bit about this regarding the course that you built to show how to show your users how to navigate the Learning Center. But do you have other examples for us?
Yeah, so as far as when we're talking about supporting customers beyond just a single course, I think, and this is not just Evolve, this goes back to Intellum, learning paths play an important role. They allow our customers to move seamlessly from one lesson to the next lesson, which creates a more of a guided experience rather than just a series of disconnected resources. And so what that is showing there in that GIF is just that, you know, within a lesson, what we like to do is have knowledge checks. We call them knowledge checks. They're assessments within Intellum, and they're located at just key points. So, for example, within our attentive learning path, we have, you know, maybe it's 4 or 5 lessons in the first section, and then we have a quick knowledge check, which includes 5 to 7 questions to test the learner's knowledge. These knowledge checks are a strive like a very strong driver of ongoing engagement because they are required for our certifications. So in order for a user or a learner to get certified, they have to go through all of our knowledge checks, and it keeps them motivated to go through our content so that they can answer these questions. In addition to just having those knowledge checks, one feature that I really appreciate within Intellum and the assessment feature is that if a user gets a question wrong, you can add the lesson that they should check out. So let's say someone goes in, they take a knowledge check, maybe they didn't thoroughly read through all the content, and so they were guessing, but they need to pass that knowledge check. So if they get something wrong, Intellum will prompt them to the correct lesson to go review. And that way they can review that lesson, they can come back and be more successful in passing that knowledge check. When creating these knowledge checks, we really try to not just generate these questions based on our own knowledge, but work with SMEs and our internal stakeholders, making sure that the questions we're asking our customers cannot are not just nice to know, but important pieces of information to help them succeed in the product, ultimately trying to avoid reaching out for support, giving them just that opportunity to be successful with their product, with using Mindbody. And so that whole flow keeps our customers engaged. It keeps them going through the content, taking those knowledge checks, returning back to review if needed. Um, and then while it's not related to this piece, I do think another way to help customers stay engaged in your content is by providing um, use cases, very real use cases. And that is something that we've started to implement more and more in our lessons are real world situations that are answering questions for our customers. Our software is fairly robust. And so having, if we know that a majority of customers need to set up their software a certain way and may have a question about how to get their appointment set up or how to have a holiday, then we're going to have a video specifically for that use case. And we found we've received a lot of feedback, both internal and external with our customers on how that is also keeping them engaged with our lessons because it's bridging that gap between learning and doing, and it's providing immediate value to the customer.
I love that. And I'm sure what I'm sensing is that your customers really feel heard in this full, in its the full learning process because exactly what you're telling them, you're then implementing from the learning side, which is amazing. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say I think so. I mean, I think we always hope so.
Sure.
And
Absolutely.
yeah.
So as you've built, you've spent a lot of time in Evolve, right? Many hours, but also years. As
Mhm.
you've built your different learning experiences in Evolve, what have you learned about your customers that's been the most surprising to you? And how did you learn that?
I do love using Evolve, and while this this goes back to feedback. Our survey that we implemented, I was genuinely surprised at how much feedback we started receiving once we made it easier for customers to share. And Evolve really gave us the way to do that by just having it visible in our lessons. And so when we introduced just a simple lesson or a simple survey for customer satisfaction, we saw that big jump, and that was surprising with those quick ratings. And we've talked about this already a little bit, so I'm not going to touch on it too much here. But I think what I didn't realize initially was how we could actually use Evolve and that survey component and then tie it back into a report with an Intellum so that we could be receiving this feedback and reviewing it on a monthly basis. And so, I mean, a few things that just surprised us was how effective it was, but also how it tied back into reporting so that we could then use that to inform our decisions moving forward.
Amazing. I'm looking at the time, so I'm going to quickly get to the next question. But what signals or feedback help you understand that the learning experiences that you're building are actually helping your customers succeed? And you've mentioned this in short frame in some of the questions we've already discussed, but yeah, if you want to dig into any of the data.
Mhm. Yes. And so on this slide here, you look at a little bit of the data here, and this is showing actual customer sentiment and feedback. And so that gives you a little insight. And this is a definite indicator into when we look at, okay, our on average in just 2025, we were averaging a 4.7 customer satisfaction out of 5. That's a very high score. It's something we prize and we appreciate. It helps validate our efforts, but also that it was such a jump from the year before. Now, that said, I don't think we would expect everything to be 5-star ratings. And so we always take a look at our anything lower, any feedback, whether it's positive or negative sentiment, and we take it very seriously. So we have our feedback loop that we're reviewing consistently. And besides this feedback here, um, so again, this is one indicator. Our ultimate goal and something that we're currently working towards is kind of adding on and building so that not just are we receiving the customer feedback, but we want to better understand how our learner center, like our customer engagement, is actually supporting customer deflection. Are we making an impact in helping customers be more sticky, to upgrade their services? We want to have that broader, more direct. And so we're looking, in addition to this, we look at metrics in the Learning Center using tools that we have access to. And we work with our business integrations team. And right now, actually helping figure out how we can better obtain some of this data. That way, we can take it back to leadership and say, hey, our content is having an impact because it's supporting, it's helping reduce support hours, like X amount of support hours. And so that's our goal. It's something we're working towards, and we're just in the progress of figuring that out right now. One other quick indicator is how often customers reach out for help. So customers are able to email us, and that is accessible from our site. And we used to, with our certification program, we receive a lot of emails for troubleshooting support. And since we took in that customer feedback, stakeholder feedback, made changes to our certifications program, we've received hardly any customer reach out for troubleshooting issues. And so that has been a signal that the change we made was positive and was needed. But we also have enabled a survey after someone completes a certification to collect their feedback. And we do see our customers, our learners, engaging and providing feedback through that survey.
Amazing. So yeah, so you're relying really heavily on the survey features and allowing customers to share their perspective or their feedback right away. That's
Yes.
great.
Mhm.
Okay, I have two more questions for you, Kristen. For the Evolve users and instructional designers here today, which I hope is everyone, what's one thing they could do differently involved to build more customer-centered learning?
We've talked a lot about this,
Yeah.
a lot. I think one of the most important things you can do is to create consistent, intentional feedback loops, and then act on that feedback. So it's one thing to gather that feedback, but review it on a consistent basis. So that can take a lot of different forms depending on your team. But I think just establishing some kind of regular cadence and using it to inform your decisions can make a big difference. So, in addition to this customer feedback, I would also recommend regular retrospectives for your internal teams. And so, even just like simple check ins can help your team uncover opportunities to improve workflows, your content quality, and how to better collaborate with your stakeholders and SMEs. These images just show some readouts. We do that monthly readout. Our project management tool right now is Asana. And so we're tracking within Asana. We have it assigned out on a regular cadence. We alternate it so everyone gets a chance to do hands-on analytical work, analyzing, taking a look at the feedback, and then presenting it back to our team. So just ways to let everyone have a chance to be involved.
Thank you. Yeah, and sharing internally, like you were saying, can also be a signal to the business that the learning is actually having a business impact. Your learning center is having a business impact. Okay, last question. And then for all of you who are tuned in, I do want to invite you to, again, if you haven't already, submit your question to the Q&A box so that we can get to it at the end. But Kristen, final question for our discussion today is as your customer needs continue to evolve, and here's a play on words, how do you think about maintaining or expanding these learning experiences in Evolve so that they stay relevant over time? So you talked a little bit about this at the start when, you did your initial overhaul and you created your Learning Center 2.0. But what does that look like? Is there a 3.0 or what does that look like going forward?
Yes, and a lot of what we've been talking about is looking at, it's maybe more micro level. And what I would suggest is taking a step back. And we did that initially because we had access to Evolve. It was a new tool and it provided an opportunity. For instance, we have new Evolve. So another opportunity that's natural for taking a look at your program and thinking about, okay, what is working well? What can we improve on? But it doesn't have to be a major platform change to kick off these discussions. I really think this should be taking a broader look at your program, your customers should be a regular cadence as well. That may be every year, it might be sooner or longer, depending on, your team, your company, your needs. But part of that look, I think, involves just staying up with reviewing your customer feedback trends. So staying consistent with that, conducting comparative research. So, not just a narrowed scope or vision of just your learning program, but take a look, experience other people's learning programs, maybe even connect on LinkedIn with someone else, have a chat about what they're doing. So, learning from each other in the industry, I think, is incredibly valuable, which is all of you are clearly already here doing that. Staying connected to industry best practices. Intellum offers a lot of these types of webinars. They bring in different speakers. Other companies do the same, and I think that's important to stay involved with. And then, very important, I think, to stay closely partnering with your cross-functional teams and your SMEs who have direct insights into your customer needs. So the goal ultimately is just making sure that these learning experiences we're creating are evolving, or again, that play on word, alongside of our customers' our product as it changes over time. That way, we are developing, creating content that is truly meeting our customers' needs.
I love it. I love that that you call out, staying connected to peers within the industry, but also attending webinars like this that just give a different perspective and a different way of potentially looking at how to do things. So with that, Kristen, we have come to the end of our questions, but I'm curious, is there anything else? Say someone were to reach out to you on LinkedIn and say, "Hey, I want a quick chat." What would you want to share in that conversation? Is there anything else you'd want to share with us today?
I've done this a lot myself. I reach out to people via LinkedIn, and it's usually because I may have a specific question in mind. I'm a visual learner, and so it might be just I'd love to see how your team is using Evolve. And while some of that might be private or confidential and may not be able to be shared, what I would hope is that someone could feel comfortable enough to say, I've got this question. How are you using Evolve for reviews? I don't really understand that feature, or tagging. Can you kind of show me your process or what your team's doing? And then it would just be a short chat where we can do some screen sharing and just kind of work through it, a casual conversation, or via just messaging back and forth. So I think it's just a great opportunity to continue networking and connecting with each other. I'm very happy to make time. If you, I don't always check LinkedIn, so there may be a little bit of a delay, but please feel free to reach out.
Amazing. And we do have a question that has come through the Q&A box, which is going back to something you talked about really early on in today's session, which is about the folder system within
Mhm.
Evolve. So this particular viewer is asking when they're using those folders in Evolve, they actually don't display inside folders. So can you talk a little bit more about how you use that feature?
So by asking, they don't display in folders.
Yeah, meaning that the main view of them comes up in different
Oh, isn't
files.
like in.
Yes, exactly. They're not
Mhm.
nested.
Oh, correct. But so no, they're not nested, but what I'm using it for is the list of folders. And so we have our list of paths for the Learning Center. So if you're looking in Evolve right now and you're just on your courses screen, on the left, you see folders, and there's a list of folders there. And then we have our folders, which are color coded to the path. I'd say we have maybe 15 to 20 folders here, and we link them to path. So, for example, I have one that's managing appointments, I have payments onboarding. And so, when I need to go in and I'm reviewing incoming requests frequently, the way I'm using this as a work case is if I know that I need to check if we have to update something for appointments, and I know I need to find this lesson, and I don't know the name of the lesson, maybe it got a different name than what's listed in within Intellum, I can just come quickly over to the folders, click on our appointments learning path, and I can see all of the lessons within that learning path. Now, they're not nested where I can just easily see it that everything at a glance. So I do have to click into it. And then once you're looking at it, this is also how we use tagging. So it's not necessarily that the path is even in order. This is more for editing purposes. So I can come into a path, say when I'm proactively auditing, and maybe I'm going to plan on making a change to a lesson, but someone's currently working on it. So I can look and see that it's in progress, and it's tagged with the person working on that lesson. And so using folders just gives me an at a glance view of what's going on. It helps me understand if I can publish something, if it's currently editing, it's in publish, it's in review, or if it's been published, then I know I'm clear to make any changes. Then we also use that tagging so I can link back and say, oh, I'm going to reach out to this designer because I need to check if I can make changes to their lesson that they're working on. So that's how we're using folders right now. And again, I'm sure everyone uses them differently, but that hopefully gives a little bit more explanation.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much. Okay, well, I don't see any further questions coming through the Q&A box. So folks that are tuned in, this is your last chance for that. If not, I just want to say thank you so much, Kristen, for sharing not only your expertise, but your experience building and evolve and just going into depth about how you've built your Learning Center 2.0, which is amazing. So we look forward to hearing more about your continued progress. And folks, thank you so much again for tuning in. I highly recommend that you complete the survey at the end of this session. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to get your feedback. And yeah, we just appreciate your time joining. So if it's your evening, good night. If it's your morning, we hope you have a wonderful day or afternoon. And with that, we'll give you 10 minutes back.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.